100 episodes, countless hours, ups, downs, smiles, fuck-ups. I'm Jake Woodhouse, and today I'm unpacking 100 hard-won lessons from 100 episodes of this podcast. Think mistakes, think wins, secrets, things I wish I had known on day one. Stick around because it might just be that lesson 47 alone might just rewrite your future. So from having 0 listeners, 0 followers, and 0 traction, just last week I did my quarterly review, Q3, and I hit 250,000 views across all platforms from the last 9 months. So these lessons aren't just my story, they're also potentially a shortcut for you to have a crack yourself. Whether you're podcasting or just chasing any big dream, I believe many of these lessons can be reapplied to anyone, anywhere, with anything. So by the end, you're going to have 100 actionable insights to steal from me for your own journey. Mistakes that you don't have to make to speed up your own progress. If you love it, share this episode with anyone thinking of launching a podcast. They need this. As always, as you know, I love Noster, so shout out for that. Please send me a zap. I'll zap you straight back. I encourage you to use a podcast player such as Fountain, where you can then boost during the episode. Or if you want to reach out directly, then please email me hi@jakewoodhouse.io. I'd love to hear what you're learning about, what you're failing at, and why you're getting back up and trying again. So let's dive in. So I'm going to split these 100 lessons up into 10 sections. So 10 lessons from each section. And because 100 lessons is quite a lot, I've got a bullet points I'm going to run through, and it's designed to be rapid fire. So I'm just going to run boom, boom, boom through them. I will occasionally stop and slow down and explain some things in more detail. But that way I hope that this won't be a 4-hour long saga of me hammering out every single detail and boring the shit out of everyone. So the first 10 lessons, I wanted to talk about starting the journey. Why even begin a podcast? So lesson number 1, and these aren't in a particular order, it's just, what came out when I was kind of tuning into what those lessons were. Starting a podcast. So this has been a great way for me to rebound. I was involved in some startup projects. They didn't work out. Those people know who they are. Shout out to them. Good luck with what they're building. But for me, it wasn't quite right. And one lesson was I should never have stopped podcasting independently. So I used to have a show called Bitcoin with Jake. And so I was like, right, I've got to start my own podcast again. Follow what you find interesting. The chances are others find it interesting too. And if that is the case, this is a more sustainable approach. Number 3, optimize for just getting going. Don't let perfect get in the way of good. Number 4, you have no idea how it will be received. That's okay. There's only one way to find out. Investing in yourself feels great. There's only one person to blame. I personally didn't want a business partner. Success rests with me and me alone. It's true accountability. All you need is a laptop and a good quality mic. That's it. No excuses. People are very generous with their time. Approach them respectfully. Be clear what you want. And get those 5 episodes scheduled as soon as you can. Don't be afraid to get help and hire expertise. Now, in my case, I was really able to leverage my experience from previous podcast projects. So this is lesson number 9. I was able to hire Mike, my producer, and Pat, my editor, straight off the bat. And I myself knew how to host, record, book conversations, etc. Lesson number 10 from the first section. There is no wrong answer. The beauty is in the organic, the storytelling, and the fireside tales. Now, given this is 100 episodes, I'm having a beer. Cheers to everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining along on this journey. So section number 2. This is 10 lessons around crafting content. What makes episodes really click. I think high level, before I even give you any of these lessons, this is a work in progress. Year 1 for me was always about focus on the content, just start hammering some shit out there, get talking to people and see where it takes you. Worry about revenue later down the line. 1, I like creating solo episodes. This wasn't obvious. I didn't expect this to actually happen. I was planning on having just guests. I kicked it off with 3 guests every week. And quite quickly that became 2 guests and me. And so what that really meant is I was trying to manage myself and not get stressed. And people's schedules change. People don't show up or they message you just before. That's okay. But then I would sit down and be like, what am I going to talk about? And I would just riff. And that's okay. I'll mention that in a second. But that's been a really interesting insight. And it's very much what we'll touch on later. So number 2, AI is a game changer. And especially when it comes to episode planning for these solo recordings, I can type in everything I want and then boom, out comes an episode outline, which I can then edit and structure. And it's really unbelievably helpful. It's a 10x, in my opinion, on previous planning. 3, I have an ability to just riff. This is something so interesting. It's a skill that I have where I've tested it in a few different environments now. Like I can just stand on stage and just start talking. And had I not been an MC at Bitcoin events, I wouldn't know I was able to do that. But I can have 1 or 2 things in my mind, walk straight up onto a stage and talk to people in public. I didn't know I could do that. And until you put yourself in those positions, you'll never find out. So it's like an intuition thing. And I mentioned just before, it was like, oh, guests can't make it. All right, I've got 3 points and I'll just riff for half an hour. Now that's morphed into now more of a planned process because I'm actively doing the solo episodes. Next, the social media platforms love watch time. This is the number 1 metric you want to go after. Interestingly, on YouTube, people have spent 2,200 hours watching my content. Isn't that crazy to think? 2,200 hours. Amazing. Thank you to everyone that spent the time doing that. Next up, the hook is the most important thing. Now, I would describe the hook as, not just the title or the thumbnail, but very much like the first 30 seconds. And when I look at my Twitter analytics, the average watch time of the video that I've posted is only 17 seconds. So you've got absolutely fuck all time to catch someone's attention, and you've got to make sure you grab it and really keep hold of it. Content is a funnel. So you've got short form, medium form, long form. And generally, this is a well-known fact in the kind of advertising space. A brand needs to touch someone 7 times before they're willing to purchase. It's kind of similar with content. And so someone will come across your short form stuff, and then they hit the medium form, and then they hit the long form. And eventually, I've already mentioned I'm not doing this yet, I will create some kind of offer, whether that's coaching or affiliate program or sponsorship. We'll see. Now, the next up, so audience size compounds. Do not worry about traction. Just keep going. Sounds so simple, right? Because there are days you're like, oh, I've got 4 views. What's the point, right? But, taking YouTube, for example, the subscribers numbers, they're creeping up. But what looks like a small number, in theory, this is not theory, but when you go from 300 to 400 subscribers, that's actually a really healthy percentage growth. It's just a small number. So if you can keep that pace up, then that compounding over time is very valuable. So crafting content, again, is the point of these 10 lessons. So it's a process. And I think of it as, first of all, production, then publishing, and then promotion. So it's like a 3-tiered process. Each phase has many steps. That's not the detail I'm going to go into for this podcast, but create a process, detail them. I love having a good editor. So shout out to Pat. Thank you for your help. I used to do this myself and I hated it. And so having someone help me do something that I don't like doing makes me being able to focus on what I can do, what I do well, researching topics, researching guests, hosting good conversations, presenting, and then I'm able to hand it over to someone else who then does what they are good at. And Pat in particular has figured out some great stuff in relation to the short form clips and also some graphics that we've been trialing. I'll go into more detail on that later. Second to that, I love having a good producer. So shout out to Mike and thank you for his help. Again, like writing your own show notes, scheduling everything to be published at a certain time, figuring out what the thumbnail is going to be, what the title might be. There's so much to it in terms of the production, the publishing and promotion of a podcast, that doing it all on your own is a hell of a lot of work. And so I've been able to hire people that I know are great at what they do, and we build a small team, and that's been fantastic. So With that, I'll pull to an end. That's section number 2 of crafting content. So next up, we've got guest dynamics. So what are some of the lessons from interviews? These are quite simple, but for anyone out there that's ever hosted a podcast or run a panel at a conference, you'll know what I'm talking about. So always keep a question up your sleeve. No awkward silence. That's the fear, right? Oh my God, this is so awkward. I've got nothing to talk about with this person. So just keep a question in mind. Someone will mention a word or a place or a thing as they're talking, and just bank it. Like, that's a good one to come back to. And just have it on mind. And when something slowly peters out, you can then bring that back in. Or you keep it super simple with prompt words like, why do you think that? So lesson number 2 from this section, it helps when you know who you're talking to. So of course, like when you get a guest turn up on your podcast, listen to other episodes they've been on. Go and read their book. Have a look at their website. What social media have they put out? Like, if you haven't done that initial phase of research, like, why have you got them on as a guest? More often than not, I would have seen people creating interesting content around subjects that I care about. I'm like, they'd be a brilliant podcast guest. I'd love to get them on. So I already know lots about them, and I've got tons of things I want to ask. But when you've done the research, it's clear that you care about who they are and their journey. And that energetic exchange is very important to high quality conversation. So next up, so I enjoy learning from actual experience. So what decisions did they make? Why? And what did they learn? And that also applies to myself, right? I will try and post content like, I did this thing and here's what was interesting. Next, so get people talking about what they find interesting. So contrary to other podcast hosts, I try to keep things as organic as possible and as natural as possible. And the more that a guest talks about things they're passionate about, the higher the quality of the conversation, and the easier it is for me to orchestrate a better overall experience for not just the audience, but also myself. And the best question I've come across for that, and I've changed the way that I start interviews loads over the years, but now I just love asking this one. What's the most exciting thing you're working on right now? And that just opens up the most amazing conversations. Next up, you must be a good listener. Now, for someone that likes talking and communicating with people, chatting away, this isn't something that comes naturally to me. To stop, Jake, stop and listen. So try to never interrupt your guest. And this is actually some feedback that I got from Pat years ago now, and we've been really working on this. Like, don't talk over them, right? Just it's about teeing them up to feel completely comfortable, calm, collected, and open. You get stories out of people that not only do they tell well, they feel ultra comfortable sharing, but it might be something that they haven't shared before because of the environment and the space you create for them. And I love that process, right? So be a good listener. Next up, it's not about the digital footprint of the guest. Now, this is something I'm really keen on. It's like I want to know people's real life stories and the problem solving process they went through that I can potentially leverage for my own decision making. I don't care if you're not even online, right? In some ways, I prefer it if you're not. I might meet you on the street and you tell me this awesome story. And I'm like, I'd love to get you on the podcast. Would you join? And there's some more about this later down the episode, but to me that was cool. Like, I don't care about how big your digital footprint is. I'm not inviting you on because your audience is large. Next up, being open to their questions is fun. This is not just one-way traffic. And I had a couple of interviews where this would happen, where it's like, Jake, can I ask you about something? And like, sure, go for it. Now, obviously temper that with, don't completely kind of like, run away with the conversation, spend an hour long episode talking just about yourself for 45 minutes. But that's cool. It's interactive, right? Next, organic is best, period. So I kind of lightly glossed over this, but it's a specific point of itself. It's 100% a lesson. Like, overcomplicating things with a big plan. It's like, this is all the stuff we're going to go through. It's unhelpful in my opinion. So you want to have a rough idea of what you want to talk about, but use those points to orchestrate the conversation. Okay, last two lessons from this section about guest dynamics. So some guests are hard work. They are a dud. Like the conversations just aren't great. Try to relax on your way through them, but sometimes it just doesn't click. And that's okay. Just get on to the next one. Don't take it to heart. It's not a big deal. Just like in the playground 20 years ago, you're just not friends with some people. And for whatever reason, now that the more work I've done around energetics, for example, I realize it's to do with vibration and people just operating at a different level. And in this case, you might get a podcast guest on that was recommended to you by someone, and just they give you one-word answers. There's nothing really sparky happening there. It's like, this is crap. And, the episode's unlikely to perform, but whatever. Don't worry about it. Move on. Now, the final lesson 10 from this: do not be afraid to ask the hard questions. Now, two topics that I've got written down in my notes here. One around the Holocaust, an episode I did with Ben Verman. Like, so many big questions there that trigger the shit out of even myself. But let's ask those, right? We have to be able to debate. We have to be able to have discussion about things that scare us or may not be true, or are, for whatever reason, you can't say that. Why not? Let's talk about it. And the other was circumcision. Shout out to Nathan Smith in the episode we did. What a difficult subject to be covering for people with such a private connection with such a, what actually is like an extraordinarily brutal thing. So do not be afraid to ask the hard questions. And I'm always saying that to myself, come on, Jake, don't be afraid. Section number 4 is titled Audience Connection, Building a Loyal Tribe. A view or a download doesn't reveal the impact or the decision making that is sparked by it. Does that make sense? So if you post an episode and you're on an RSS feed and you've got a bunch of downloads and you see, oh, okay, I've got 600 downloads on that episode, or 60 on that episode, or whatever. Or you put a YouTube video up and it's got 15 views. You don't know who that person is that viewed it or listened. And sometimes you get this extraordinary feedback loop where you find out who that person actually is, and you find out that they did something in their own life as a result of the content you create. And my example of this, I did an episode with Miles Dillon. Shout out to Miles. And it transpired that he had listened to Bitcoin with Jake consistently years ago when he was running his own plumbing and gas business. And he was literally fixing sinks, listening to Bitcoin with Jake. And all these years later, we were on a podcast together. And it turns out he'd sold that business and was traveling with his family and was creating his own Bitcoin podcast. You think, oh my God, epic. And he was teaching me about how I had taught him about Bitcoin and the choices he then made. And that's so goddamn cool. I'm not necessarily creating this podcast to create a connection with the audience, but it's an amazing side effect for what content can do. So lesson number 2 from this section: I started putting call to actions in my episode. Comment if this is interesting, or email me, or send a zap, just like I did at the start of this episode. And from that, I get all sorts of interesting feedback. So one was a public post, a follower on Nosta, Matthias, and he was talking about how he'd been listening to the episode I'd posted on the way to work. And it just struck me, it's like, God, what a, in many ways, private relationship we have with someone where they're sharing your time, they are sharing their time with you whilst they're going on their commute. And I got a WhatsApp from another listener, and I won't mention who it is, but because it's a private subject in a sense, but they came back and said, oh, Jake, you know what? I was listening to your episode recently about the stuff you were discussing around the Holocaust. And that's a really difficult subject to approach and to cover. And just, it's really impressive how you held the space to do that in a respectful, but also inquisitive and curious way. I think, wow, what an incredible piece of feedback. I had no idea you even listened to the podcast, let alone that is what you would find interesting. Lesson number 3, I don't actually know the value I've created. Like, how crazy is that? You are out there creating this content, posting this stuff, started a small company, taking risk with your capital, and you don't know the value you've created. And those last two lessons summarize that in a sense. Like the ability for a podcast to drive value in people's lives isn't necessarily aligned with the content creator because you don't know what decisions people make. But as someone who, and if you've listened to my podcast, one thing I like to make decisions around is this idea of humanistic, intellectual, and financial capital. And so in some ways, I think of the podcast as an investment in humanistic capital because a subsection of that is your network. And people get to know you, right? It's not necessarily any longer this idea of it's not what you know, it's who you know. It's like, no, that's old. A better way of framing it now is like, who knows you? And creating content's a brilliant way of doing that. And you're basically building a reserve of humanistic capital that you can draw down from in the future in scenarios that you have no idea about. In some ways, it's like having sound money, but in humanistic capital, sound humanistic capital. And I might have lost some of you there if you haven't heard me talk about that stuff before. So next up as a lesson, authenticity is key. People sniff the bullshit. And I know that's the case for me when I'm consuming other content. And I've got some awesome feedback from people being like, Jake, we really feel like you're exploring things that you care about, and we love that. Next up, I'm not doing it for the audience. I'm doing this for me. Now that might sound really, is that arrogant in some ways or ironic? Like, why would you be doing this for you and posting it publicly? But my thought process is this: I believe long term, the most successful outcome or result is driven by my motivation to carry on. And the only way that I'm going to carry on long term is if I do what I find interesting. Like having this perfect avatar who's 37 years old, white male, who's interested in investing, and they really want this type of content. Well, A, that's me already, but B, I'll get bored making stuff for other people. Make it for what I find interesting. And that's why even in just the last 10 episodes, you would have heard me covering all sorts of very different subjects, like looking at Austrian economics, looking at how I healed my eyesight, like all these different niche things. And it's because I find them interesting. And funny enough, that resonates with other people. Next up, Noster. This has been a huge lesson and will be my focus going forward. I have managed to get 50% of the attention, shall we say, or views that YouTube has achieved in the same period of time on Noster. So my YouTube channel is at about 95,000 views all time, and my Noster.build profile tells me I've got 40,000 unique views. I mean, that's amazing traction on a protocol, as we know, that apparently doesn't have any users, right? And what Nostr is to me long term is the best long term allocation of capital because it's a protocol and not a platform. So you cannot be deplatformed. So anyone that's putting time, effort, and resources into Twitter, into YouTube, into Instagram, you could be rug pulled tomorrow, or you could be shadow banned, or some other form of, stealth attack. And it's that phrase like, you can have freedom of speech, but you don't get freedom of reach. And basically Nostr flips that on its head, right? And this isn't an episode about how amazing Nostr is, but this has been a big lesson. It's like, okay, you're out there in the media space pumping out this content. Well, now you can do it from a solid foundation like never before, right? No content creators ever had something as cool as Nostr to build on. Next up, okay, this is just an actual specific email I got, which is really cool in terms of the audience and how it's been building and growing. This is in relation to the podcast, so give me some feedback. It's not pure money and financial blah blah. There is a search for meaning behind your inquiries and in your conversations, and is really refreshing and resonates something with me. Wow. And this is an email from someone I never met before. This is unbelievably inspiring and is an incredible lesson. And as I said, okay, I'm doing this because I want to create this stuff and I find this stuff interesting. But when you get feedback like this, whoo, this is the magic sauce that really makes you want to carry on doing more. And you think, okay, well, I've got value out of this. And now I'm sharing it. Someone else has got value out of it. Like, what a powerful process to go through. So next lesson. So in terms of the audience itself, and just to remind you the category, so this is audience connection. It's useful as feedback for inspiration on other episodes. So you can ask people, you can put content out there and you can see what's popular and what's not. And some stuff flops, but the stuff that doesn't, it's like, we'll make more of that, right? Or you can run polls and things like that. It's like, what do you want? Really simple lesson, but an effective one. Lesson 9 for this section. It's got me thinking about next steps. And I've never done this before, right? But what would it look like to build some kind of community around the podcast? And there's platforms like School or Slack or WhatsApp even, where you could have people, maybe they pay a monthly subscription to be part of it. Maybe it's free. I don't know how to build it, but it's really like, oh, cool. Well, that's quite inspirational. If people are getting value from my podcast, then why wouldn't they get value from a community? And I think about like how cool it would be if I could actually understand people's decision making when it comes to investing. And if there was a selective invite only group where it's like, oh no, I sold this today. It's like, why? And so a phrase you may have heard me talk about is ask a man what he owns, not what he thinks. It's like, I want to know exactly what you're actually buying and selling and what you own. I don't care at all what you think. And maybe that's something you could do through a community. Final lesson for this section, and this is really just a hunch, just to throw it out there, but maybe this is not about building some kind of huge audience, but it's about a valuable one. And flipping the script on the ad model or the attention model. And so instead of being able to say, oh, I've got this many gazillion viewers and this many gazillion followers, and therefore you're going to have to pay me to sell your product to my audience, it's about delivering something different. Now, what is that different thing? I don't know, but I got some great feedback about how it's just raw signal, no ads. We love it, Jake. You're like, cool. Well, I love that too, actually. So how could I build this in a way that continues? And I'm like, oh, what's the lesson in that? I don't know, but it's inspiring, right? It's a hunch. Section number 5. So growth hacks, scaling downloads and impact. So what have I learned about growth along the way? I mean, I guess the first thing before I do any of this is my podcast is still tiny. 250k views is absolutely fuck all. And really, from where I'm sitting today, that's kind of what you've got to be generating per month to be effective from a kind of ad revenue perspective, like selling sponsorship contracts. So I've got a 10x from here before I'm going to start getting a knock on the door from interested sponsors, and I will, and it's a work in progress, but lots of work to be done. So growth hacks. Okay, so here's one thing I've learned is really just this idea of the audience journey. Like, how does someone become a listener? And it's pretty obvious to me that most people are consuming short form content. And when they see enough of that, like I mentioned before, like 7 touches from a brand, they might have watched 7 short form videos. They go, oh, maybe I'll watch a medium. And by short, I mean 30 to 60 seconds. Medium clip, 5 to 8 minutes. And then they quite like the medium clip, which is, from a proper long form conversation of some form. I'm going to go and listen to the long form. And then it's about converting them to regular long form listeners. And that being the goal of a podcast like what I'm creating. And so the lesson here is like that's the customer journey or the audience journey, because I'm not a customer per se, because there's no exchange of cash involved at this stage. But this is why the syndication or the splicing up of long form podcast content is so important, because it's how you drive audience members to your long form content. And that's just a cool insight to have picked up, and something I really want to flesh out is like, how do you grow this thing? It's like, right, well, you've got like a top of funnel, which is all your short form content, and you want to pull them through to medium form, and then you want to pull them from the long form, and then you want to make them a regular long form list, and you've got to keep them there. And then you've got to have newsletters, and you've got to have all this other different value you can provide, a paid community like I just touched on. Next lesson. And this is kind of what I mentioned just before about content syndication. So the lesson is, and I'll mention this later, but as a podcast and as a small team, we've built in 9 months a workflow, which is essentially a competency. That we know how to host, record, and then publish long form conversations that we can create medium form clips, short form clips. And it's a way for me to scale my time. So I could spend 2 hours a week recording the call and whatever other time it takes to get someone on that call. And once I've clicked share the episode with my team, I don't have to touch it because that's how I've got it set up. And it's something I've actively invested into, is this content syndication process. And that's where Mike and Pat, they've improved in 9 months. It's great. Like what we were putting out as short form clips 9 months ago is now so much better. Like the B-roll footage is better, the imagery is better, the in terms of graphics and the music and stuff, and it's clearly improving because we're getting more attention from it, more views on the short form. Next up, what gets measured gets managed. Wow. I mean, that's a really simple business phrase you might have heard, but I've been doing it quarterly. As I mentioned, I've hit 250K views of the video I've posted on all platforms since launch, but maybe I should have been doing it weekly or even daily. I don't know what the right answer is, but the point is you can get, when you put this content out, what comes back is essentially feedback from the market. Is it good? Is it not good? Did it go viral? Did it not go viral? Now, of course, in some ways, there's a discussion to be had about like, what's the purpose for even posting in the first place? Do you even want to go viral? But what I'm getting at is like, unless you're looking at the data, you can't see how well your content's doing. And if you can't see how well it's doing, you don't know what's done well and what didn't do well. We'll make more of the stuff that worked well and don't make more of the stuff that didn't work well. And so it's basically a way of iterating publicly. Next up, clickbait works. Like it really does work. Think of a YouTube video, someone like screaming that catches people's attention, or big graphic, and then a title. It's like how to get rich in 5 minutes or something that's clearly not possible, but people click on that stuff, right? If you don't deliver value when you've used a tactic like that, the audience feel cheated and they won't come back. Now, in general, because of someone who has adopted a Bitcoin standard, because of someone who values low time preference behavior, someone who's looking at creating long-term capital, I'm not really interested in clickbait. However, being entrepreneurial and I like trying new things, like it's crazy not to try the YouTube game when you're creating content like this. Next up, so 𝐓𝐈𝐿𝐒𝐃 𝐂𝐋 has, just flown into the world of content over the last couple of years, and he's got a bunch of books that you can go and read, and he has this really interesting framework: hook, retain, reward. And to me, this has actually been the most helpful framework to think through when it's come to particularly the solo episodes I create. And shout out to Alex. Maybe I'll meet him one day. That is a really cool process to go through for all content you ever make, and I highly recommend it. So next lesson. In the long form, I don't do any preamble. I just get straight into it. Like there's a short audio tag, which we created, the rippling of a flag, which we really liked. And boom, the conversation starts. There's no intro, there's no music, there's no like chopped up audio, nothing. In my opinion, that's what people are there for, right? They want the conversation. They don't want the same pre-recorded intro and then a 7-minute long waffling on about some advert for a product that person might have never used. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's all bullshit. Get rid of that. Get rid of the preamble. Next up, people have loved not having ads. And it's just raw signal, right? Lesson 8. So TikTok. So we tried this and we got absolutely like a full nothing burger. And we were posting a bunch of videos and no views. Like, TikTok, what the hell? How are we not getting a single view? And I stopped and I was complaining about it online a couple of months later. And shout out to Timothy, who runs the Free Cities podcast. He was like, mate, you've got to start TikTok again because we're getting a bit of traction. And so we went back and we actually then had a whole catalog of short form content that we could use. And we created a new handle and we started posting more regularly on a specific schedule. And boom, in the last couple of months, we got 10,000 views or something from TikTok. So it's not game changer yet, but it's important because we'll build on that. And as I mentioned, the audience compounds. Next up, this is kind of part of the hook, but it is a specific lesson. It's like the title is incredibly important. And shout out to Mike. He's a bit of a guru here. He loves thinking through like how to get people to click on the content, how to deliver the most value in like that, because there's a certain amount of characters. You don't really want to have a long title if you can. There's a whole thought process behind it, but really it's about like, how do you tell someone exactly what they're going to get if they spend time listening to your content? Crucial lesson. Finally, I've learned that I want to write. Now, I haven't actioned this yet. I previously wrote a newsletter a couple of years back, and I've had other stabs at it on different occasions. And I really enjoy telling stories and writing them. And I haven't yet done this, but I will. It's something like, well, yeah, I mean, I guess it's just ideas to how to grow. But newsletter is one, doing more Instagram stories is another. And finally, we've done some work around posting all of my episodes on my website with transcripts, and there's an SEO angle to that as well. That's probably a whole nother episode in itself. It's like, okay, Jake, what are some of the different growth options from here? So section number 6, overcoming flops. What are some of the lessons from failures? Now, I absolutely love this because, the idea of like make failure your friend, it's completely on point. You got to just get up, try, get up, try, get up, try. So what hasn't worked? Well, I haven't been a guest on any other podcasts in the last 9 months except for 2, which was with Bram and Patrick. And the reason that I did that is because I wanted to focus entirely on being a host and focus on my own podcast. But by not going on other people's podcasts, I wasn't able to increase my reach per se by borrowing other people's audiences. And I think that's been a mistake. So it's something I will look at in the future, is joining other people's podcasts as a guest. Next, optimizing for story rather than digital footprint has definitely slowed me down. So earlier I mentioned it's just not about your digital footprint. I want to know what you did and why that would be valuable for me. I don't recommend this as an approach when it comes to like growing or trying to growth hack your podcast. But this is just my preference. But basically, obviously the social media platforms, they like it when people have got hundreds of thousands of followers and they, retweet you and the audience goes mad, and it's just lots of people spending time on these platforms. And I was like, I don't care if you don't have a digital footprint. So that it's a personal preference. Maybe it wasn't a mistake, but just it's a lesson. I'm not happy with how my X profile has performed. Having built a following on another handle of like 7 or 8,000 or something, it's like, oh, I was expecting it to go gangbusters with all the good content we've been posting. But I think the lesson is I'm not being social on there. And I look at platforms as platform risk now that Nostr exists. And therefore, it's just a matter of time before you get kicked off, especially if you go and talk about some things that the status quo don't like. And so I'm using them as a way of broadcasting, and I'm basically not being very social. I do that over on Nostr. Come and join me there. I'd love to hear from you. But that's definitely slowed growth down. I'm not replying to people all day long and spending lots of time on there. And X knows that. It's like, well, this guy's just posting stuff. He's not actually interacting with anyone. Next lesson. So shitty internet. Oh my God. Like, it's happened so many times. Hosting a call, the Wi-Fi cuts out, and you're having to apologize to the guest, and you don't know if it's your computer or it's the guest computer. The conversation doesn't flow properly. And that's been a massive fail, to be honest. Like, it makes me want to do in-person conversations really badly. And is another reason why I've been so happy with the idea of going just onto solo episodes. It's like I don't have to deal with shitty Wi-Fi. Like, I'll be moving around a lot. But definitely that's an absolute fail when that happens. Now, this is not from this podcast, but it's happened before and it's worth mentioning. I had a podcast called The Green Adventure, and I was meeting people in person doing podcast episodes back in 2018, I think this was, and didn't turn on the microphone. Like, what a fail. So I've been trying this for a long time now. On Bitcoin with Jake, I had 𝐄𝐏𝐈𝐒𝐿𝐒𝐃 on the podcast. So anyone that's in the Bitcoin space knows, like, amazing thinker and writer and great person to learn from. And when we finished the call, I couldn't find the recording. So what the hell? How have I had Gigi on a podcast and I've just lost the recording? This is crazy. No, how does this happen? And then I found it in some random Zoom folder a few months later. I'm like, oh my God, thank God for that. And I was able to post it. But like, fail, Jake. You don't lose the recording. Guest no-shows and last-minute cancellations. Like, yes, I've been able to iterate and develop solo episodes myself. As I mentioned already, so 3 per week became 2 guests and 1 solo, and now it's slowed down to more like 2 solos episodes per week. But the process of managing guests, I just felt this strong resistance to it for some reason. It was annoying around my personal commitments as a father and homeschooling and moving around the whole time. It's like, God, like, so what's the time zone going to be? And okay, I've got to book this call in. It's like, it was just too stressful. And so it was like, look, this isn't working for me right now. I'm going to focus on this solo stuff that I'm enjoying and see where it takes me. So that was a bit of a fail on my own behalf, I think, in terms of like just managing the operational side of a guest flow. Big lesson next up. Don't beat yourself up. You're the boss. You're only competing against yourself. This is about like lessons from failures. If you don't put out the content volume that you said you were going to do, so I'm going to do 3 guests every single week and I'm going to hit 150 episodes by the end of year 1. I won't achieve that target, which is what I said when I started. But don't beat yourself up. You're the boss. You're only competing against yourself. And I hit some amazing stats recently. So there's billions, 4.5 billion internet users, and 90% of them consume content. And of the 10% that don't only consume, only 1% of that 10% is actively creating content. So 1% of billions of people are out there actively creating content every day. So when I saw that recently, it's like, just keep chipping away, keep at it. You're already well ahead of the pack. Yeah, I'm about to say this, and it's 9:30 at night. So when I'm tired, I'm not as good at hosting. So when I was hosting calls at 8:00 at night, I'm a bit slow. It pisses me off. I'm just not I don't host as good a conversation. And that's a fail. Like, it's a complete fail. You made all this effort to get this person online and you're just not active. Like 8:00 at night, you should be going to bed, not hosting a high level conversation. Final lesson for this stage. Try not to look at the data. Now, this is contrary to what I was talking about before, but 4 views on YouTube. It's like, oh, what the fuck is the point? What is the point? But the point is the audience compounds over time. People see you showing up every day, trying, getting better, doing it again. And to build something of value long term, like a personal brand, which will come out of this, but also the community that I will build, the offers and the products that I'll create revenue from in the future, it's all part of this process. So just, basically scratch that personal itch. I want to be a podcaster for the rest of my life. Okay, great. We'll just make it happen. Okay, number 7. I hope I'm getting through these fast enough. We're not going to go massively over an hour, I hope. Okay, so mindset shifts. So how has podcasting changed me? Okay, lesson number 1. So humanistic capital. It's an incredible investment in your humanistic capital. Because, and a subsection of that, maybe I should recap this for people. Humanistic capital for me mainly is family, investing in your relationship with your other half and having children. Like, what is the point of spending your whole life creating incredible financial returns to then give your capital to no one? You've got no family to have any descendants. Like, it's crazy. You've got to have humanistic capital in your life. But a subsection of that is your network, like I mentioned before, which are basically friendships, right? So podcasting, it's just unbelievable for making new friends and new opportunities. Opportunities like being an MC. I mentioned before, I've found that I have this skill where I can just stand on a stage and just talk. And it's entertaining to people and they love it. And they come up to me afterwards like, Jake, you're so good at that. Have you had any training? I'm like, no, I just do it. And those are just awesome things that come out of starting a podcast. Like the opportunities, the abundance, it's unbelievable. Next up would be intellectual capital. So you're learning from people, right? People telling you what worked, what didn't work, why it worked, the opportunities that arrive. So it's wisdom, it's knowledge, it's decision making. Like talk about like investing in your mindset. Like run a podcast, go and just talk to these people. It's unbelievable. Like shout out to Jason Parks, my energetics mentor that I'm still working with, on a weekly basis, came on the podcast early on. What an incredible guy to learn from. And arguably that's pretty common when you do podcasts like this. Like many of us, I struggle with self-confidence is probably not the right word, but this podcast made me invest in myself. It's like, look, fuck this. I've had enough balls ups with people as business partners where things didn't align. Everyone's got different stuff going on in their lives. They're coming at things with different financial perspective, different time perspective, different skill sets. That's okay. But maybe you just have to be the boss. And that means you got to put your head down. You got to go for it. You know you can. You know you're talented. But like, if it goes wrong, it's on you, mate. So it makes you invest in yourself. And that's a great mindset shift. Like back yourself. Go for it. Another shift. So we mentioned this before. It's like you have to be a good listener. But being a podcaster made me a better listener. Like I wasn't great before. I really wasn't great. I would cut people off the whole time. I would talk over them. And I learned that was just, A, that's disrespectful. But B, I probably was doing that in day-to-day life anyway. So it just made me a better person. Next lesson. I've been so humbled by people's feedback. I know I've said like, this is all about me doing what I find interesting or following what I find interesting, which is true. But it's just crazy when you hear stories like Miles, like I already mentioned. Oh mate, I listened to your podcast. I learned so much. I made these decisions. My life's now better. Like how incredible is that? That is beyond humbling. There's another man that I met at Bitcoin Alive, and I forget his name, but he was friends with Andrew Page, and I met him at the bar, and he'd listened to every single one of my Bitcoin with Jake episodes. He was like, "No, I've listened to every single." I was like, "What do you mean, 80 episodes? You've got to be kidding me!" It's like, "No, been through it all," and that is just beyond humbling that people find that much value in it. So next lesson. So you don't realize how much you learn. So you start a podcast and you don't know anything, right? You start doing all this stuff. And shout out to Dave. I'm having a beer. And he's been he owns a business locally, which is a gym business in Melbourne, and I've been doing workouts there. And we just got chatting recently. And I was like, why aren't you doing content? And I was teaching about that funnel that we just mentioned about, the short form into the medium form into the long form. It's like set aside 2 hours a week, sit down, have a conversation, get someone to chop it up for you. Boom. Now you've got 5 or 6 different videos from the week that goes out on all your channels. And none of the other gyms locally will be doing that. So it puts you ahead of the pack. Why not? And when I'm telling him all this stuff, I just didn't realize how much I'd learned about what I was doing. So start a podcast and you learn. Next up, momentum beats perfection. For the perfectionists out there, stop fannying around. The graphic needs to be like this, or I haven't quite got the right name, or I've got to have a better microphone, or the lighting's not quite. Fuck that. Just keep going, okay? You don't fail until you stop. Optimize for getting stuff out there, basically. Next up, so recent solo episodes have forced me to dive deeper. And in some ways, this is actually really like when you're hosting a conversation, you're asking someone about them and what they learned. And when you're doing the solo stuff, it's actually like, no, Jake, what have you learned? And that's kind of cool, right? So it makes me dive deeper. And with that, that's a real mindset shift of going, okay, I'm no longer the guy that started a podcast because I'm asking people about Bitcoin, why are you into Bitcoin and what are you doing? You're shifting into more of a position. It's like, no, I know what I'm doing. And here's why it's interesting. And that's like that classic arc that people go through from like researcher to, you go from being the student to the teacher, essentially. It's exactly what it is. So what other mindset stuff? I've got 2 more points to make here. So and I love this phrase, like, this is making me master my craft. And so for me, it's like, okay, I know that Bitcoin's going to be a big part of my future life. But one thing Bitcoin teaches you is it's a savings device, and it basically obsoletes the need for being an investor because it's outpacing basically every single other investment you can make. So what is it, Jake, that I'm going to do with my time? Yes, I am an investor, but the investment is done, you know? And it's that great question, like, what if Bitcoin solves the wealth problem? You don't need to be analyzing markets, looking for opportunities. You just buy Bitcoin. It's like, okay, well, what do I love doing? I love podcasting, talking to people, learning new stuff. And that is what I'm going to hone my craft around, or master my craft around, is how do you orchestrate the highest quality possible conversation? How do you pump out the best quality content? And again, work in progress, but niche down. Become an expert in your space. You move from that, researcher asking questions through to the authority, but it's all about proof of work. So what you originally post is dog turd years later, but look at how much better you got, and that's what people like following along, right? It's the hero's arc is another way of describing that. Finally, and again to remind you, this is in terms of mindset shifts. Again, Jason, I just mentioned, so life's all about vibration. And, if someone's angry with you, it's not your problem, it's their problem, right? Their anger is a reflection of their own inner turmoil. And the higher the frequency one can operate at, the different consciousness levels you can access, the superior or more sophisticated form of opportunities appear. And so a podcast in some ways is a way for you to have a signal, boom, 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 beaming out to the world, where you're dropping digital breadcrumbs that people can collect when they're ready. And I don't think I fully understand the consequences of this right now. But like, what am I going to be? Am I going to be an investor? Am I going to be an educator? Or am I going to be someone who, just hosts excellent conversations? Will I end up in politics? I don't know. But at this stage, it's about raising my vibration, seeing who I can access through that, and what opportunities come out of that for me and my family. Let's find out. So I think that's an incredibly cool one. And I've written here, it's one giant process of meditation into being your own brand. It's a cool one, right? Cheers. We're on to section number 8. Thank you so much for following along, by the way, and still listening to this episode, 50 odd minutes in. 100 lessons from my first 100 podcasts this year. So number 8, production secrets. So this is kind of behind the scenes stuff. Develop a process and automate yourself out of it. Or at least automate yourself out of the bits that you don't like or that you're not good at. And so when I've recorded an episode, it goes to Mike and Pat, and they basically do everything they need to do, and then it's published. I basically don't have to touch it, but all of those different tasks that they achieve, I used to do, and I've now got people helping me do that. But the tech stack that we're using, so Notion, Calendly, Riverside, Descript, Adobe, ChatGPT, Grok, Canva, Fountain, Signal, Gmail, G Suite, Primal Studio, Nostr.build. I mean, those are the high level ones. What I'm thinking to do is an episode with Mike and Pat, and we'll show you the whole workflow. And it's a really cool thing to go through, because you'll see what actually goes into producing the kind of quality content that we're pumping out. Next up, a good mic is key. I mean, honestly, that's the very least you can do as the host of a podcast, is get a good microphone. So just sort that out. Good location. So it's not enough, in a way, to have a good mic. It's like, are you in an echoey room? Are you going to be interrupted? Can you focus properly? And like at the moment, I got a train line coming past me the whole time. Like, damn it, there's a train running past. Like, that's not ideal. Next up, so and I mentioned this already, but like, if you've got bad internet, do not get stressed. When you're using Riverside, it records locally, right, on my computer and their computer. And you can upload both tracks and then you edit them together. And like in some cases, I've had conversations where people have literally dropped out like 5-8 times in a 60-minute call. Like you can't get any flow going. It's a pain in the ass, but people do actually have it going. In terms of a production secret, so chopping up content from a 60-minute conversation, you should get 3 to 4 good short clips, and you should get 3 to 4 good medium clips. I like to write an intro email. So this is a good lesson. Like you're contacting your potential guests, you want it to be professional, right? Hi, this is the Jake Woodhouse Podcast. This is everything you can expect from the call. Here's some of the things you might want to think about before in terms of topics. Here's the technical details in terms of how you get onto the recording, and make sure you've got a good mic and headphones. Like super simple, right? Very similar email goes to everyone, but like do it. Now, this is something I always do, is a pre-record conversation. I get the guest onto the call, and before I click record, I'll always run through the same things. So I say, number one, if you say something and you fall asleep tonight and you're like, I wish I hadn't said that, let me know, we can edit it out. If you fall asleep tonight and you're like, God, that entire conversation was complete dog shit and I don't want to post it, no problem, we won't post it. And number three, any questions for me? And the idea of that, just like put them at ease, right? The more relaxed and chilled they are, the better the conversation is going to be. Next up. So Noster, again, and this has been a good theme, but very few people globally are investing in this right now. And to me, this is a huge opportunity. It's not like when you use Noster, it's a protocol, right? There's no algorithm. It's not a platform. You can't be deplatformed because, old Zuck doesn't like what you're talking about, right? Your proof of work in terms of content production and publishing on Noster is yours forever, providing you keep those keys safe and Noster survives. Now, in terms of like having this in this section, so production secrets, it's like I'd never used Noster.build before. I'd never used Primal Studio before. It only just got released. These are things, tips, tricks that you pick up. Next up, we moved across to Fountain for our RSS feed. I used to use Spotify for Creators, which was Anchor years ago. So I'm a paying subscriber of their product and really pleased with it so far. Happy to support a Bitcoin and Noster focused business. Final lesson from this section, branding. Like I decided, don't fuck around, Jake. And I went to a branding agent in Byron who helped me out. And shout out to Ben. The colors, the fonts, the imagery, the banners, the logos, the touch and feel of the entire project is hugely improved when you've invested into that. And I wanted people to know when they came across my content that here's someone that's taking this seriously. And the same applies for my website. It's simple, but it's also effective and real. And that was very important to me. Okay, we've got 2 more sections to go. So monetization of value. How do you turn this passion into a profit? Okay, so first lesson, and this is more just a recap. So year 1 for me of this podcast was always about the content. Focus on the content. So it's all been cost, and revenue for me was something for next year. And I do look at the my company bank balance, and I go, fuck, okay, this is adding up. But I'm also, I'm conscious of the fact that I've made investments in other areas that are doing really well. And so this is about investing in my future, outside of just hodling Bitcoin. That's a good lesson, basically. Like, just keep going. Invest in yourself. Don't, year 1 was about the content. You knew this was going to happen. Just keep going. Another lesson. So I've signed up for some personal brand coaching with BTC Gandalf, aka Daniel. Now, I had to put this on hold because I was moving around too much. I just had too much on my plate, and I'll get back to it later in the year. And with that, I'm going to create an offer or multiple offers, depending on what the results are. And I'll certainly be looking at how to grow things from a revenue perspective. And I think the main focus is going to be some kind of coaching program. How do I help people who are sitting on a pile of money, who don't understand what money is? It's like, look, you've got lots of capital sitting there, but you have no idea the power of Bitcoin and self-custody. How do we get you there as fast as possible? There's going to be lots of hands-on coaching. Another lesson. So I've been doing my own accounts, of course. So every single cost is on a G sheet somewhere. and I've got it categorized, and I'm obviously retaining these records for when it becomes a revenue generating business. Like I started a limited business to do the podcast. So, one day I'll be paying GST, and I've had to pay contractors every month. So shout out to Mike and Pat, and also Ben for the branding. And I've been doing, my own direct loans to the business. So just helpful, like all knowledge, like applying it to a real case rather than some kind of theoretical case study in a student environment. It's just so much easier to learn, right? It's like, well, we're starting the business because of X. All right, now we've got to fund the business for Y. Okay, now we've got to do Z in order to do that effectively. So one lesson about monetization is I feel from a sponsored perspective, which is the obvious way of monetizing a podcast, is that I would like to get to a size by which I'm being approached by companies. And if that happens, I'll make more revenue much faster than me now scrapping around for small sponsorship contracts when I could just why don't I just keep going for another year and wait to see what happens and see who approaches me? And I'll get a better deal then that will be twice the value of what I might get now and for half the amount of work. So it's essentially like keep investing, see who reaches out. One angle is definitely affiliate marketing. Now, I've been looking at this recently. It's interesting. An exchange, for example, will be like, get $50 if someone ever makes a trade through our platform. It's like, okay, well, that's not going to change. That's not going to change much, right? But I realized that the affiliate partners is actually, it's not really a moneymaker for me, but it's very valuable for the audience. So if someone was to come across my content, get onto my website, find a resources page and be like, God, what is this whole like Bitcoin thing? Okay, look, I'm in, America, or I'm in Australia. Okay, here's the local exchange that Jake recommends. Okay, what's the hardware wallet he recommends? What's the, multi-sig setup? All this different, quite niche knowledge. So, well, look, all the affiliate partners are either people that I've met personally, products I use personally, or are highly recommended, or they've been on a podcast. I can see the value add for an audience member to stumble across it. Be like, oh, look, he's actually done all the work for me. I can just use these products now with high confidence. So that's something I'm going to do. This is more of a question. So it's a lesson in that I'm having to ask this question now. It's like, all right. So from a pure financial perspective, this business is loss making at the moment every month, doesn't create revenue. I haven't even tried to create revenue. But the business owns some things. So, it owns, for example, all the social media profiles, the YouTube channel, the X profile. Like, what are they actually worth? My Nostr keypad. And I don't know yet. Like, how do you value that? Like, how do you value 250,000 views in 9 months from a startup podcast? I don't know. Because someone out of those 250,000 people might have gone and made a decision that made them $1 million. I don't know. I'd love to know. Reach out if that's you. So this is something I'm trying to think through, right? As we're in a phase now where the traditional way of measuring the value of a business or pricing a business is like, well, what's the operational expertise and return? So what's the profit and loss? So, okay, cool. But actually now you can just own Bitcoin on the balance sheet, right? So when IP is on the balance sheet, how do you value that? And when reach is on the balance sheet, how do you manage that? So we're building a process here of competency where it's like, okay, the Jake Woodhouse podcast can take a conversation and that conversation reaches 250,000 people. Well, that's valuable. But how do you value it? That's something I'm going to figure out. I mentioned this before. I like the idea of a paid community group, sharing due diligence on deals or investment opportunities, sharing ideas, decisions. This could even go as far as being some kind of angel investment syndicate, where it's like, okay, you pay an annual fee to be part of the syndicate, and you can invest alongside interesting people all around the world in different businesses. Like, to me, that would be so freaking cool. And especially as like an add-on to any coaching that you might create. So, okay, I've taken 10 people through my coaching program over the last 2 years. They would all have been required to do some kind of interview and application process to get in. So it'd be screened and very selective. But I would also make it such that they were people that were in control of large pools of capital, and therefore they're looking to manage that capital as effectively as possible. And if there's a way of beating the Bitcoin hurdle rate with a risk that is not too high, then why wouldn't all of those 15 people that have been through the coaching program be like, sure, let's put some money in? So I could see that being a really cool future area where I basically build out a community of highly incentively aligned people who've built cool things in their lifetime that are willing to take bets alongside each other. Like, what a cool thing to do. I would love that. Now, one thing I could do at this point is actually go, do you know what? We're going to focus on creating content for 2 years, and we're not going to create any revenue in year 2 either. And what that is a bet in myself in some ways, but it's also like the total cost of next year as well. Well, I know what that will be roughly if we carry on at the pace we're going. The audience size at the end of 24 months rather than 12 months will be very different. And therefore, the potential revenue from 24 months versus 12 might actually be so much greater that you might as well just not even bother trying to create revenue for another 12 months. I don't know what the answer is there, but something to think through. And the lesson obviously being is I set out with a strategy. When do I review that strategy? Well, obviously the 12-month mark, but when was my strategy wrong? I don't know. Okay, second to last lesson in this section. I did an episode on all the different ways you can make money as a podcaster. So I wanted just to refer back to that. Like, a lot of the lessons are already in there, and I shared it a couple weeks back. Finally, so I'm wary of ego and am I throwing good money after bad? If you're selling Bitcoin to invest into a small podcast that's not making any returns, why? You could just own Bitcoin. So how do I beat the Bitcoin hurdle rate with my time and my capital through this project? And one thing I'm conscious of is I've put here, quote unquote, brand awareness. So if I'm a marketer and I go to someone and I sell them brand awareness, I do not follow what I discussed before, which is what gets measured gets managed. It's like, no, mate, I bought you some brand awareness with your marketing dollars. It's like, no, Jake, I want to know how many people saw my stuff. I want to know how much extra traffic was on my website. I want to know how many people purchased and created revenue using your specific, whatever you call it, referral link. And so it's kind of like a personal trainer. There are personal trainers that the first thing you do is they will get you on a weight, they'll get you on the scales, they'll get their calipers out, they'll get your body fat fitness, they'll get your body fat percentage, and they'll track it over the 8 weeks that they're training you. Or you get a PT that's like, yeah, come in, I'll get you in the best shape of your life. Never asks you how much you weigh and never looks at your body fat percentage. And the point is, it's like, you need the proof that returns are actually being generated. So this is something I'm very aware of and need to get better at. Okay, last 10 lessons. And these aren't necessarily lessons more than like projections, I guess, but look ahead. Where is the Jake Woodhouse podcast going? And so this is really a thing about vision. This isn't all about financial returns. And I think that's been something hopefully that's come through, right? And when I coach people about the concept of humanistic and intellectual capital, the point is you need to be investing in those two pools of capital. So intellectual being, what your knowledge or wisdom is, your mindset, what are you educating yourself around? Humanistic being really your relationship, your family, but subset to that being your network, your friendships. Without humanistic and intellectual capital, you cannot get financial returns. So you have to invest into those pots first to then get the financial on the back end. So in some ways, running a podcast is not about financial returns. It's about investing in your humanistic and intellectual capital. So just keep going and the revenue will come. Next up, I'm unsure on the type of content that I'm going to end up doing. So I started off like heavy on the guest, and now 9 months later, I'm heavy on the solo. So what's going to be the middle ground? There's probably going to be some kind of hybrid where I'll do like, one presentation / solo stuff a week and I'd love to do like, 3, 4, 5 hour long guest conversations, but ideally in person. So, when my life settles down a bit and I've bought some real estate and actually physically spend time in certain places, I'm going to be able to build that out. But it's an interesting one. Like, what's the next 100 episodes going to look like? I don't know where I'm going to be 100 episodes from now. So being your own brand, this is a massive idea and something that I haven't spent much time talking about during this episode. But we have the tools today to be your own bank. That's what Bitcoin is, right? But we also have the tools to be our own brand. You don't need a production company to come along and be like, oh, we're going to turn you into this big TV star. Not that creating a podcast about being a big TV star, but recently I watched an excellent episode of The Chef's Table, which I love on Netflix, the cooking show. And it's about Jamie Oliver, someone I've, known about my whole life, having grown up in England. The best bit about it was when he told a story how he had, he was at home, he was working at the River Cafe, and he had the day off, and he got a call, someone was sick, and he comes in to work, and he's cooking away, and there's a TV team there, and they spent all night following him around. He had no idea they were going to be there. Within a very short period of time after that, he had his own cooking show. Now, the point of telling that whole story is you don't need to have that stroke of luck to be posting content online. It's already there, right? The ability to reach millions of people is, an email address and a password away, should you choose to operate on these large digital monopoly platforms. So why wouldn't you, right? Now, Nostr is a different thing completely, but, why wouldn't you create your own brand? And that is something I'm absolutely interested in doing. Next up, I've really had to learn about the philosophy of protocols. And in some ways, I was already well down this rabbit hole because Bitcoin is a protocol. It's a set of rules, and we abide by the rules. And so it's a system of rules, not rulers. And it's exactly the same thing when it comes to social media and looking at the status quo playing field of like Twitter and YouTube and Instagram and TikTok. These are all rulers, right? You misbehave, off you go. Whereas Nostr is a protocol. It's a system of rules. And that's very different. There's no platform risk. This is a huge lesson on where this is going. It's like the best long-term bet for me, for sure, is Nostr. So I'm going to double down on that and really make sure that, if you get onto Nostr, that following my NPub is one of the best things you will do. Now, it's not very easy to be found on Nostr, and that's something else I'm going to have to learn about, but that's a story for another day. Next point, don't be afraid. Jake, stop fucking around and ask the hard questions. Be willing to go where others don't. I'm excited by that. Next, so better feedback mechanism for decision-making of audience. How do you profit from that? We've covered this already, but a view is not 3 years later someone makes a decision as a result of listening to your stuff. So how could you create a situation whereby a podcast and the flow of educational content that you share with the world benefits people in their decision making and adds to your bottom line? I don't know. I don't know how you build that, but it's probably going to have something to do with Nostr and Zaps and syndication of content where you can auto share Zaps earned as revenue from a podcast episode straight to the guest that you had on. I don't know, but that would be really cool to think about how you might align that better. So this has been an interesting one. So the hardest part of doing all of this has been balancing my commitments as a dad. And I've got 3 young kids, and we homeschool them, and we do it together, my wife and I. And as a result, I was up this morning at 5 a.m. with my son, and my 2 girls were asleep by 8:10, and then I didn't start creating this till 8:30. It's like slam for time, right? And it's stressful when they're at your feet and they want your attention, and it's the worst. I'm on my phone, it happened this morning in a coffee shop, writing the episode outline for this episode. I'm like, cool, I'm going to get them some food. They can play in the little player over there, and maybe I'll just get a minute to do this. Before you know it, they need something, and I'm kicking them off. It's like, no, Jake. They and what they need are so much more important than anything I might want to achieve right now. And so I must get better at that. Next, I have worked on this a lot, but setting a self-image, creating a vision, and I've done this work over the course of this year. Podcasting is a part of my life forever. Now, exactly what form? Is it going to be hosting guests, or is it going to be creating solo content? I don't know. But allow it to evolve. And I'm always saying this to myself now, Jake, just allow it to unfold. Like, I am a world-class investor of humanistic, intellectual, and financial capital. And that is the vision I'm working towards, but also the reality that I'm trying to bring into my present day decisions. The content piece is a huge part of that. And that's where, shout out to Pom. You might not agree with all the investment work that he does, but he talked through at one stage the idea of the triple threat. And this is where you use a blend of content, business, and investing. And I really, really resonate with that. So why wouldn't it be the case that I'm actively making investments, of which Bitcoin is probably going to be, well, Bitcoin is not an investment, it's a savings tool, but it's best viewed through that in a sense at the moment. But also running my own business, this podcast, maybe others. But creating content through the process of those two other actions is the magic sauce. That's where the wizardry is. And so the triple threat is such a big part of my future, and I'm really unbelievably excited about that. So I just don't fucking stop, Jake. Okay, we're down to the last two lessons. Here we go. So this is lesson number 99, essentially. I'm really apprehensive about my offer. And in some ways, I'm just like, I've got to go out and ask people for money. What am I going to ask them for? Like, why am I going to do that? And I've been procrastinating about like how to do it. And this is the problem that I'm avoiding. And it's this procrastination that is the work. And that is what I've got to just take head on, right? What's the worst that can happen? Oh, well, people say, no, Jake, I don't want to buy that from you. Sorry, go away. It's like, okay, fair enough. So just to recognize that, it's like, Jake, take a breath. Plenty of people are coaches online. Do it. And people will benefit from it and you'll really enjoy it. But I'm a bit like, what if anyone doesn't like it or like me? And that's just an interesting feeling to share. And finally, okay, I have learned, having done 100 episodes, that I'm going to make 100 more. I have a vision. I have the urge. It's a calling in many ways. I've got the capital and the time. Now, the outcome is unknown, and that's okay. It's been very, very, very exciting. So there you go. 100 lessons from 100 episodes. Now, this is a curveball. You might not have expected this to happen. Have a quick swig of my beer. I've mentioned a few times Pat and Mike. Shout out to both of them. They've been brilliant in the last 9 months helping me build this. Frankly, I wouldn't have been able to do it without them. But I've got some bonus lessons for you, another 20 lessons, of which 10 are from Pat and 10 are from Mike. And I asked them both, like, what have your top 10 lessons been from these 100 episodes? And what was really interesting was the fact they had such different takes from myself. And I think in hindsight, what I came up with was really a lot more about like the business building behind it, perhaps, whereas this was much more around like what the content taught them. This was the impact of the intellectual capital they were gaining as a result. So Pat, work with ease, not with go, go, go. Jason Parks. 2, the 5 mental hamster wheels. Rob Brinded. Number 3, so male suicide every 3 hours in Australia. Mike Dunworth. The saying, daylight robbery, from Max Hillerbrand. Triple threat investor, Pomp. Fine art investing, Lewis Liu. Bitcoin curing his economic nihilism, Nathan Fitzsimmons. Number 8, software versus hardware investing. This was an episode I did, number 94, relatively recently. Number 9, the saying, safe as houses should be banned. Don't make this real estate investing mistake, from Miles Dillon. And lesson number 10 that Pat loved was the S&P 500 priced in gold, an episode that Danny Knowles and Dr. Jeff Ross did on what Bitcoin did that I reviewed as episode 69 of my podcast. Really cool, right? So Pat could think of like 10 specific people that I'd covered that he really loved. And those are all incredible topics, Pat. Shout out, mate. So next up, Mike. markets are smarter than experts. 2, without financial privacy, our other freedoms will be quickly eroded. 3, almost everyone learns Bitcoin the hard way. 4, the hardest part of self-custody is psychological, not technical. 5, action leads to clarity. 6, the solution to volatility is position sizing. 7, there's no point to generational wealth without generational health. 8, prices are the market's way of compressing a bunch of information into a single data point. 9, Bitcoin is a forcing function for truth. 10, technology changes the world, not politics. Nice one, Mike. Shout out. Thank you. And what was interesting to me here is he didn't mention a single guest or me, but more like fundamental things that he's learned from the last 100 episodes that he's taking with him. And isn't that cool? I mean, some of my favorites here, action leads to clarity. That is probably the summary of the 100 lessons in 100 episodes. It's just get going and you'll figure it out along the way as to like where you need to go. And so with that, we made it. Thank you so much for your time. As you know, I'd love to learn. And what is it that you love? Like, first of all, I'm interested in finding guests. So who do you like listening to? Why? Can you introduce me to them as my audience? Like, please, I'd love to learn from you. And I'd love to learn who you're learning from. Equally, if you've got a story that you'd like to share, reach out to me, because having guests on the show that are actually audience members, again, I don't care if you're, famous online or not. The key is having made interesting decisions. And as I get more settled, I'm going to do some in-person conversations. So keep an eye out for those. As I mentioned at the very start, if you're listening on Fountain, then I'd love a boost. If you're on Nostr, send me a zap, because I will send you a zap straight back. If you have a friend who's an aspiring podcaster, then obviously share this with them. There should be a ton of things in here that they can find useful. Finally, reach out to me on email, hi@JakeWoodhouse.io, if there's anything you want to share. Thank you so much for your time, attention, and support for the podcast. Let's carry on learning together.